and welcome to another episode of Minutes to Midnight with your host, Martin Murphy. Two very special guests tonight. I have the leader of the National Party and founder of Eron, Justin Barrett, and his wonderful wife, Rebecca. So I'm going to bring the guys up and we're going to chat for about an hour or so.
Good evening, Martin. How are you?
Justin, Rebecca, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it, especially the two of you.
Yeah, we're together. We're actually in separate houses as of this moment on separate lines.
That's a wonderful way to make a marriage last.
No. It's just comfortable internet here, as opposed to Rebecca has an iPhone. It's a better connection. By the way, you're on mute at the moment, so if you could just put that. There we go. Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
yeah, that's fine.
There's no apologies. There's no script. There's no nothing. This is the completely uncensored. You can say what you want. You can do what you want. You can curse. You can. There's no rules. Like I said, it's just conversation. And the whole point of doing these is literally just to have conversations with other human beings. We get very, very caught up in, long format podcasts and interviews and this, that, and the other, and people don't just talk naturally and allow people to eavesdrop. But there is a couple of things I want to talk about because you guys were affected by the storm as a lot of people in the Midlands and the west of Ireland were. So I just want to kind of hear about that. I've heard a little bit of Rebecca talking about it on Spaces. So just the current situation in your area, and we'll say further afield. There's still a lot of people without power, isn't there?
Now, as of today, power is back with everybody in our area anyway. Everybody has power back. But we didn't get our power back until last week. We were 13 days, was it, without any power? It was terrible. I mean, we were lucky in that on day 8, we were able to go to my mother's. She lives only across the road from us. It's actually where I am now. I'm with her, so she can look after the kids while I do this. But we had no power. We had nothing. We had no water even for most of that time. Our water came back first, then our power came back. But we were lucky, like I'm saying, we were lucky we could go over to my mother's house and she had electricity after the 8th day. But we still had eight days with nothing. Like she's 70, my mother's 70, and she has arthritis, and she had no heat, she had nothing. Like she had a little fire, but the problem was, well, similar to us, she has a back boiler, and we were afraid.
Yeah.
We were afraid that we would.
And no phone, actually.
No
phone on the first day. So we couldn't even text or call to see how she was. And our car was blocked in to the driveway with a fallen tree. So we couldn't drive over to see how she was. We couldn't ring her to see how she was. It was the late evening of the first day that we could even just check how.
And it was one tiny area in the kitchen. I managed to get phone coverage, and I texted her, and I got a little text back saying she was okay, everything was fine, not to worry. But like I was worried, and it was terrible. And it's terrible how long everybody has been left. And like it's like a third world country. I mean, it's such a basic human right to be able to warm yourself, wash your children, wash yourself, have water. It's incredible that
it's interesting you say third world country, because I would firmly believe that we are rapidly heading into that territory. We've had a crumbling health service for 30 years now. Most of our civil service doesn't work. Our infrastructure is crumbling, and then we have obviously the influx of IPAS. We might deal with that later. But do you think that this, especially the people in the west of Ireland and the Midlands that were most affected, do you think this will wake people up a little bit to the fact that government is not going to save you? In fact, government doesn't want to save you, and most likely government absolutely hates and detests your very existence. Do you think it'll wake a few people up, or it'll make people realize that the state is potentially our enemy?
I worry about the reaction, to be honest, because being longer on the tooth than either of you. If you remember Ceausescu's Romania, he had this notion, which he called a very simple name, which was systemization. But what it amounted to was this horrific notion of taking the villages of the Romanian countryside and moving all those people into tower blocks, like Ballymun, but just out into the countryside, whereby the state, could then turn on, off electricity, water, any supplies that were required, and also the police could literally lock the front door of a village, and that was it. Right now, I'm not suggesting that that's a carbon copy of what's being done here, but there seems to be a element that is using what has happened within like circles that have power and influence in this country to advocate the end of rural living, and therefore a kind of a systemization of sorts. Maybe not a tower block exactly, but yes, you must live in the local urban area, because if you don't, every so often, and maybe from extended periods of time, they won't officially announce that it's a punishment or anything, but every so often the lights will go out, the water will turn off, and people clustered together are easier to control.
It's not, yeah. I wouldn't say that that's anything outlandish to say, because the state already punishes via taxation, via fines, via, you know what I mean. This is all within. I have a big. There's something I'm trying to work out myself in my head, and we might talk about it later in relation to the difference between the state and the nation. So where I'm sitting right now, the state of Ireland is my enemy and has been my enemy for quite some time, whereas the nation of Ireland is something I'm willing to hopefully live for, but you know what I mean, willing to die for, and they're two very separate things.
Yeah,
and the people in the country are probably more connected to the nation of Ireland, and therefore they're a problem. And self-sufficiency, they do not want us to be in any way self-sufficient. They want us constantly with our hands out, relying on the state for everything. But we're working on that. And again, we'll touch on that later too. But
yeah,
I want to jump to a different subject, which is kind of really important to me, and it's going to be kind of more focused, centered on Rebecca, I presume, but I could be wrong. So all of your kids are homeschooled.
There, yeah.
How, why, when? You know, just give me the whole background as to why you as a couple made that decision, and you know how you went about it. And
so I was a primary school teacher before I had my first son, and I taught all the way through my pregnancy with him. And then when he was born, I said, no, I want to stay home. I want to stay home with him. I want to raise him at home. And as he was approaching the age of 4, I was kind of thinking to myself, you know, I didn't really like the way classrooms were even back then. He's 10, he's turning 10 this year. So that's 10 years ago now. So I didn't really like the way the classrooms were, because first of all, there wasn't enough resources for the children that were in the room. Like, I taught a class of 42 children. So I had 42 children in front of me, and there were maybe, I'd say, like less than half of that were Irish children. And this is in County Longford. Like, so, I mean, anyway, I just didn't like the way the classrooms were. There were so many things even back then that I didn't like, and I didn't think were appropriate for children. And like, that's 10 years ago, so compared to what it is now. But anyway, I said to Justin, I said, like, look, I'd like to give it a go, homeschooling Adam. I'd like to try it and see how it goes, because he was only approaching 4. And I said, look, when he turns 4, I want to try and do what I would kind of do with a junior infant. I want to kind of see how that would go. And we started off, when I started off, I was definitely a lot more curriculum based. Like, you can get the national curriculum, you can get it on ncca.ie. And I've got a little video on my X about that. Like, I can post stuff later, but it's actually really easy if you want to follow the Irish curriculum. Now, I wouldn't recommend you follow the Irish curriculum exactly, but if you want to do exactly what they're doing in a school, it's not difficult to follow along. It's not difficult to follow the curriculum. There's planning tools, there's everything you would need on this website. But anyway, I started off, and I did start much more, like, you know, strict and to the curriculum with Adam, and I really was trying to do that. But like, I noticed there wasn't much point to this. A lot of it was kind of waffly stuff, and he was picking stuff up really quickly, much faster than he would have if I was teaching him in a classroom. Because when you have your own child at home, you know them, you know what they can pick up on quicker, you know how to explain something to them that a teacher doesn't know them that well, you know, and they have 39 other children that they have to teach at the same time. And also, teachers, they have to teach to like the lowest common denominator in the child. They have to, in the classroom, you know, they can't be teaching your child, just that child at their level. They have to teach every child, and to the lowest level, basically, so everybody can keep up. You know, your child is waiting for everybody in the room to catch up with them. And like, I'm not saying he's a genius or anything, but like, it was just easier to teach him because he was on his own. But I noticed, like, it wasn't taking all day. It wasn't taking like 5 hours in primary school for small children. It wasn't taking that long. I was going, I'm getting this done in an hour or two in the morning. And I was going, okay, this is a bit weird. And then kind of, as I had my second baby, I had Noah, and I was kind of thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to like pull back on this a little bit. And we focused a lot more, we focused a lot more on play, and we focused a lot more on just going out in the world and just experiencing life and experiencing, nature, and just even, really simple things like if I have to go to the post office, or if I have to go to the bank, or even grocery shopping, I take them with me, and they have human interactions, and they're getting prepared for what's out there in the world, like the real world, and like they'll make the shopping list with me, and they'll get their reading, they'll get their language through the shopping list, and we'll do maths, they'll calculate our budget and all sorts of things like that. And there's so many, real world ways of teaching your children. You don't need to sit down and do so much at home work with them. Now, obviously, as they get older, like Adam, like I said, is 10 now, and he's doing fifth class work for maths, and he's flying it, like he loves it. But we only spend about an hour, I'd say an hour in the morning. That's it. We do 1 hour of book work, and we do a little bit of it, and then the rest of it is just our daily life, and he just lives it with me. He just follows along. They all just follow along with me. And so we have Adam is nearly 10, Noah is 8, and then we have Jamie, who is I'm trying, because I'm 5 of them, I'm trying to make sure I get these right. And they've all having birthdays as well just recently, so it's like I'm trying to get them right, and they'd be so cross if I got them wrong. And then Jamie has just turned 6, and then the two smallies, obviously, they're only 1 and 2, like, so they do nothing. They just play around the place. It's like they play with bubbles and things. But the main thing I would say to anybody who's considering homeschooling, if you haven't put your child in a school, don't do it. Your child will flourish at home. Your child will just, my children are just they're so happy, like, on a daily basis. They when you put your child in a school, they're exhausted. When like, I have family members, my sister-in-law now, her 2 kids are in school, and they're so tired at the end of the day. All their energy is taken up from trying to sit still for 5 hours a day in a classroom, and it's just not natural for a child to do that. Like, children are supposed to learn. Yeah, they're supposed to learn from being alive and being around them.
I would agree with everything you're saying there, and just from my own experience. So we did childcare. We got sucked into the 2 incomes when we were younger, when we were first married and stuff like that. But just to the shifts I was working, I was the person who had to drop my son at the time to the minder, and I swore I would never do it again with any other children, and we didn't. My wife stayed at home and raised the kids for her next 2, and it's mommy is so important too. Like, daddy's important too, but daddy's job is different to mommy's job, and her job is so important, and it's very, very underrated. The system that you're talking about there, can that be replicated in small communities? As in, you could have somebody like yourself that was a qualified teacher that could take on 4 or 5 children. You know what I mean? Let's say when your boy's bigger and you're, what I mean? Could we start our own schools that taught?
Yeah, we absolutely could.
Relevant information that's actually useful to create good humans.
We absolutely could. If people didn't feel confident enough, or they wanted somebody who was qualified, like, of course we could do that. We absolutely could do that. But I don't think we need to do that. I really don't. I really think that the mother is, like, absolutely best placed to teach her children in the home. And like, that's what I'm saying is, you don't need to sit down for hours in a day and teach them. It's just so unnecessary. They don't need that. And like,
but I'm actually talking about kind of like not a school in the sense of the anglicized version of schooling that we adopted. I'm talking about actual, essentially like the scouts, so to speak. Do you know what I mean? Where you spend time outdoors, you spend time working with your hands. And Justin, I'd like to hear your opinion on this. I have an opinion that, you know what I mean, once you actually reach the age of 12 with the ability to read, write, and have basic mathematics, you can pretty much achieve anything in the world. The ability to read and write, to comprehend and communicate, you know what I mean? The world is your oyster.
That is pretty much true. And Rebecca would be best placed to know this, because she went through the education system to be a primary school teacher. So she knows how the departmental schema works. Not just in terms of, shall we say, the more nefarious elements that are being put in there through deliberate.
Well, I'll say them out loud. Multiculturalism, Islam, the trans ideology, the rainbow cult. You know what I mean? All of these things are designed to weaken minds, destroy minds, and make young humans subservient.
Exactly. But there are flaws in the system that can be overcome by parents that are not malevolent in and of themselves. They just have to do with what Rebecca was saying a moment ago. They have to do with the pace at which different children learn, the fact that the class sizes are so big, the fact that they cannot be mobile. You can't take 42 children and take them if you do take them out for the day, that's an enormous task and needs planning months in advance, etc., etc. Whereas if you're homeschooling, you put your own children in the back of the car, you head off to somewhere of historical significance or religious significance or whatever is of interest, whether it's the aquarium, for example, what's got to see the, instead of in pictures in the books, let's go have a look at the fish in the now maybe not in the wild exactly, but
Why not?
but in a habitat of sorts, where they can see what are effectively what we would say are exotic animals in a normal environment, and just that part of the flexibility of learning and the vastness of learning. And yeah, I know this from 40 odd years ago, is kids are reaching, if you can call them kids, young people are reaching university level. And I have heard from many college professors and university professors that the first year now is bringing people up to the educational standards that they should have been at 10 years before. In other words, they come into third level, some, not all. It depends on the school for a start, depends on the individual too. But some of them they are not literate, they're not numerate, and you can't teach them on a third level when you're missing the second level and the first level. And
the drop in standards in relation to third level education. So I can trace it. Look, you guys might be better read in this. I can trace it back to affirmative action in the 1960s in America, and that seems to be, from what I've read, that's where the bar that was set so high, they started dropping it and dropping it and dropping it and dropping it, and to accommodate different cultures, to accommodate different ideas, but it was all to do with accommodation of people coming from lesser socioeconomic backgrounds, people coming from, like, the intentions you could argue were good, but the net result was poor. But I don't believe the intentions were good. I believe the intentions were the adaptation of cultural Marxism into the third level in the States. And most of what happens there does seep over to Europe and into Ireland and England. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on cultural Marxism as a whole, because Ireland does seem to be infected with it. And you might call it something else, but it's all kind of the same thing. It's your woke students, it's your far left leaning governments, it's your, you know what I mean, big business, rainbows everywhere, you know what I mean, everybody walking on eggshells for fear of offending people, etc., etc. I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that, or where do you think it came from or stemmed from?
Well, it traces back, doesn't it, philosophically, ideologically, to the Frankfurt School, and it is, cultural Marxism. There's no other phrase that encapsulates exactly what it is in practice. And like I don't know how this was happened, right? But I was just born on the right side of the bed, if you know what I mean. I was born a right winger. So I've found myself in conflict with the way things are pretty much my whole life. But so you would think I would have heard of something like white privilege, for example. You think I'd have been confronted with this as a concept, as an idea in political life. No, it wasn't. It was Rebecca that brought that home to me from her studies in college to be a primary school teacher. the phrase, the exact phrase, the first time I heard it, white privilege, was from Rebecca, not from racist texts or, you know, or these hate mongers that I'm supposed to be or listen to or anywhere else. First time I heard it was out of the University of Limerick, and a primary school teacher student there who was Rebecca, and she came home saying, oh, well, we had a lecture about white privilege. And I literally went, what is white privilege? Now, that's many years ago now, so it seems silly for me to even say like that I was able to say what is it.
I'd be curious just to ask Rebecca, do you remember the lecture on it? Do you
Only
remember
vaguely.
do you remember who gave the lecture, or even where?
I can't give you her name. I can't remember her name. I'm sure I could find her if I went on the Mary I website. I'm sure I could find out who she was. But I can remember it was the backpack of white privilege. That was what the lecture was about. And it was basically that white people always carry around this backpack with them their whole lives. And we had to be especially aware of this as teachers, because we were privileged as white people, and we were to not, impose our white privilege on the children that we were teaching, because we were going to be teaching, children of different.
It's going back a few years now, but how did you feel sitting in that in that lecture?
I thought it was ridiculous. I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard in my entire life. I was going like, it just seemed bizarre to me. I remember I just sat there going like, the backpack of white privilege. I'm carrying around a backpack of privilege. What are you talking about? Because what? And I remember I came out.
The strangest part of the conversation actually was that, and I don't remember any more than Rebecca who the woman was that gave the lecture, but she was an outside speaker from one of the NGOs, and I had debated her on the radio several times myself. Now, she had never used back then, this is way back now, she had never used the phrase white privilege on radio. And she had never used it in argumentation or debate in open live forums that the average ordinary Irish person would have heard. But there she was, putting it into the minds of the primary school teachers that they were to put it into the minds of the children. And I guess the concept, and it's part of cultural Marxism as well, the concept is don't argue with the older generation. Don't even try to introduce new concepts to them. Get into the universities, get into control of the people who have control or access to the minds of the young. And then the next generation coming along will be your wave. Whereas you just argue with Justin Barrett on the radio as just, oh, you're straight white old male. I wasn't even an old male at the time. It was just, but straight white was enough. But the word white privilege wasn't there. But I had debated the very same woman, and that meant that those philosophical concepts were in her head when she was talking to me and when she was talking to the radio audience or the TV audience out there. But they were more elaborated and constructed as she gave lectures in college, which were mandatory for primary. And you had to understand and know and practically believe these concepts in order to qualify as a primary school teacher. And therefore, one leads on to the other. And so,
is it unfair to me to say that it is technically a form of brainwashing?
Oh, it is brainwashing.
Oh, very deliberately.
That was my thought. Why are the cultural Marxists better funded and better organized than anything that can hope to oppose them?
That's because of who's behind them.
Yeah. Here's where we run
who's behind them? Is it free and open forum?
I'll tell you on a very basic level. There are 32,000 NGOs in Ireland. Now, not all of them are dealing with cultural Marxism directly, but they are all government funded. They are also funded by various foundations around the world. Like
USAID is a prime one at the minute.
And so forth. Now, without getting into too much controversy, the fact of the matter is there's a common ethnicity among the billionaires who fund these foundations, who subsequently fund the infiltration, if you like, of the third level education system, which seeps down to the primary and secondary level. And also, just look up the names of the minds behind the Frankfurt School of cultural Marxism. They figured quite correctly that economic Marxism had failed. Not only had it failed, but it had so patently failed that it was no longer plausible. But that as a means of dissolving Western culture and civilization, economic Marxism was not necessary. That the philosophical and cultural ideas were more corrosive, and that they could be introduced into a society that functioned in a free market scenario. So they were perfect for Western
I'm going to
Europe.
put you on the spot now, Justin. Right, and like I said, this is only going to be your opinion. To what, and look, I'll say it as well. We're talking about the Jewish influence. So look,
we are. We're talking about the Jews.
This is a free form. So there's nothing taboo, and everything is opinion, and everything. Then a lot of opinions turn into facts eventually once you dig deep enough. I'm currently somewhere in my quest, and this is the thing. You have to get there by yourself. I'm actually in a part of Africa now, going back just to the kind of second Egyptian era, if you know what I'm talking about. There's somewhere in Somalia that has something to do with something, but I'm only scratching the surface of it. But we have a very interesting history if you actually go digging into it. But to get back to it, to what end? You support and promote cultural Marxism to collapse Western society. But if you collapse Western society, you pretty much have you can have totalitarianism, you can have anarchy, you can have lots of things, but none of it's productive.
Yeah, and here's where we come into the real controversy, I guess, of the question, is the assumption being that let's take non-Jewish left wingers, which is vastly what you'll actually meet on a day-to-day basis in an Irish context, right? But the malevolence comes from somewhere else. But they do not intend to construct. This is the strange part about cultural Marxism and modern Marxism in general, is the political and economic ideas that Marx expounded in Das Kapital, for example, with all their faults and failings, stood behind a facade of trying to construct an alternative functioning society that was better than the capitalist one, as he viewed it, that was currently in existence. So the propaganda for it was essentially constructive, that we will construct an alternative society and it will be a better society. But what the Frankfurt School and what cultural Marxism has added to it is the open effrontery of deconstruction for malevolent purpose, deconstruction for its own sake, deconstruction and demolishing of all that is traditional and all that has been there, not with a view to constructing something new per se, but to simply get rid of the old.
And is that in itself a form of anarchy?
It is a form of anarchy, and it is a form of decomposition, and it is essentially parasitical. In other words, if they were to achieve their aim exactly as they have expounded it, then they too would cease to be able to exist within the society they would have created. So
It's an almost terrifying form of nihilism.
it is, yeah.
But I suppose I look at things slightly differently. I believe that the man's greatest evil is greed. I think man is inherently greedy, and we have to fight. Some of us aren't, but I'm saying as a whole, we have a. It could be something to do with our, prehistoric ancestors. You know what I mean? That the food was scarce, and you know what I mean. You have to look out for oneself. But I think there's different traits. The greed is something. The greed is almost a religion to some people, and I think that's what drives a lot of the woes and ills in the world, is this insatiable thirst for more. Do you know what I mean? Whether it be power, whether it be money, whether it be whatever. I think the richer and more powerful these people get, the more decadent they become. They're like the French aristocracy, or the whatever you want to talk about. The Romans were fairly disgusting at times, but they all met the same end. Eventually, people got sick of it and rose up, and we run in these cycles. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that, but if we were in one of these cycles, how close do you think we are to another revolution, so to speak? Or is it not in us anymore?
How close are we as an Irish people, or as Western Europe?
I would say we'll bring it back to Ireland. As an Irish people, we'll say
as an Irish people, we are very, very far away from it. To be honest, we are not psychologically ready to accept that. And part of the reason why we're not, I think, has to do with the speed at which it has happened. It has happened things that took 40, 50 years. They began in, like, shall we say, almost immediately post-war Britain, post-war France, post-war continental Europe, and maybe didn't even make it into the American mainstream until the late 50s, the early 60s. We had none of that until, say, the late 80s and the 90s. And so, but we have caught up. We were, for example, Ireland prides itself on being the first country to legalize by referendum gay marriage, so-called gay marriage. I mean, there's no such thing, but the legal documentation that gives the same legal rights to homosexuals. We are also, as far as I am aware, and I am open to contradiction on this, but I think we are the only nation state to ever have legalized abortion by referendum, as opposed to either a court judgment reinterpreting the constitution of that country, or a parliamentary vote. But
which one of those votes is more jarring with you? If you had a magic stick and you could actually say, right, one of these I can overturn with the snap of my fingers, which one would you overturn?
Well, it would obviously be the abortion one, because it is the life and death. It's there's no argument as to which one has had the worst implications, and which one has directly destroyed lives. But to disconnect the two from a cultural continuum, it would be wrong as well. For example, I would suggest that had the gay marriage referendum failed in 2015, we would not have had an abortion referendum.
No, that's very, very reasonable. I would agree with you as well in relation.
But which is the worst?
The gay marriage.
We're talking about the vivisection.
Should not have passed.
Yeah, we're talking about the vivisection and the tearing asunder of human beings, or even at the earlier stages, their chemical deaths. So this is clearly worse than a legal right that can be given to two people to do bad things, like objectively immoral things with each other, or that would be legally sanctioned. But as on a political
I wouldn't.
continuum.
You see, I wouldn't have an issue with you can. I do believe in love, and I believe you can love whoever you want to love. But I believe that our state was founded on the notion of man, woman, children. That's how, as a species, and if you've any
Yes,
concept of evolution or how we survive, man, woman, babies. That's it, and that should be protected at all costs, and that should be held above everything else. And what you choose to do in the privacy of your own bedroom with another consenting adult, to be honest with you, it's none of my business. I'm not going to tut or anything to anybody, but there should only be one type of marriage in this country, and that is between a man and a woman, and there is only a man
Well, it's
and a
the only
woman. There's
it's the only kind of marriage that can benefit the state, because it's the only kind of marriage that can naturally provide children, and that's what the state needs to continue and to go forward. So
but
that's
the thing is,
yeah,
it's written into our constitution,
yeah,
and some people might spit in the constitution, and some people might say it's the one of the greatest documents ever written. It doesn't mean anything because it's not implemented, and it's completely ignored
yeah.
by the state, not the nation. But yeah, I hold family above all else, man, woman, and children, and everything that the country can provide should be to the benefit of that natural union. And I'll put in the caveat that it should be to benefit Indigenous Irish unions, not anybody who's not here. There should be. I've been saying a word a lot lately that people are kind of, because they're shocked and they're kind of, well, you can't say that. And apartheid, I believe we should have a completely apartheid taxation system. That there should be one set of rules for the Indigenous Irish, and anybody else, if you're here, that's fine, but by God, you're going to pay. And I think that's a good, it will be a good system for dealing with our immigration. Let's just make this place so unpalatable to come to via taxation. And like all, I would take the libertarian approach in relation to social services and benefits. If you're not Indigenous Irish, we're not even looking at you. Goodbye, leave.
well, yeah, like it's. I mean, you can get the notion of from socialist theory, shall we say, or communist theory as regards social welfare and why it should be paid and why there should be a welfare state and supports for people who like fall below a certain minimum.
A safety net is always required.
But
yeah.
but why though? Why? Like, what is my? See, this is my own opinion, and I'm very much in favor of the concept of the welfare state per se, and I would not do anything to damage it. I would restructure it, mind you, but I would not do anything to damage the fundamental concept of it. But why though? Why should, shall we say, why should those who do not take from the social welfare system contribute to the social welfare system? And I believe that the only logic of that makes any sense is that we have an obligation to people who are of ourselves, who are of the national family, as it were. And like a brother who has, or a sister who has fallen on hard times, or a parent who is now elderly, or a child that is helpless at birth, that our obligation comes to have this safety net, to have this protection, is for the strong to protect the weak, as it were, the economically strong to protect the economically weak, comes from a sense of national community, and that obligation is bound up with being related to each other at its blood base. And if we are not related to somebody, then we have no economic obligation to them. They have their human rights as human beings, and that's fine. But what are my obligations to another person if they are not of my people? And the answer to that question is quite simply, I have no obligations to that person if they are not of my people. So I do have a right as an Irish person to say, if somebody is living in this country, and I don't oppose everybody be has to have been born in this country of ethnic Irish descent. That's not quite necessary, but the supermajority does. And our obligation to them is quite simply, yes, we are entitled to say to them, no, we will only have you here insofar as you benefit us. You have no natural right to be here. So you are here on an agreement, on a contract, if you like, which states that if you will do this for us by way of contributing X amount of tax and X amount of work and X amount of expertise that are not present in the Irish workforce, insofar as that's a real thing as opposed to a manufactured idea, but we have a contract with you, and we will honor our contract. We will protect your human rights. We will protect your property. We will protect you from violence, and we will, and so on and so forth. But we do have a right at the same time to say to you, look, this country belongs to the Irish people, so you're going to have to earn the right to be here. And by earning the right to be here, you're going to have to pay more taxation. And the safety net that you fall back on cannot be our safety net, cannot be our welfare state, because that is there for our people to benefit from, because they are of us. And so when you can't fulfill the contract of the Irish people, the foreigner can't fulfill the contract of the Irish people, which is that I will provide you this in return for that, then the contract is broken. And he or she must go home at that point.
The social contract is the social contract currently broken in Ireland?
Oh, it is, absolutely. It is a system of pure legalisms. There's no moral foundation to it anymore, and nobody pretends there's any moral foundation to it anymore, which makes it all the more extraordinary. Except, again, you'll hear on the very far left them talking about our obligations to the whole of humanity. Now, the reality is that nobody can fulfill. The great part of it, from their point of view, is if you are obligated equally to the whole of humanity, then you have no actual obligations, because
it's every man for himself.
Me as an individual, I can't help 8 billion people, and if I can't help 8 billion people, but I must help everybody equally, I tell you what I can do is I can help nobody.
How do we help?
That's my excuse.
How do we help the Irish people, because we live in a small little island, off the west of Europe, with a very, very small population. People don't realize how small a population we are until they go to somewhere like London or New York, and then they see, if you're lucky enough to get to Japan or somewhere like that, you see or if you venture to India for whatever mad reason you'd want to go there, that you'll see what people, but the Irish people cannot perceive the number 1.1 billion or 1.3 billion Chinese is probably far more now. They can't seem to perceive that in numbers, that if the gates aren't closed, they're not going to stop coming, and the supply never ends. How do we? I don't know. Should we be showing more videos online of what an average Indian city looks like, or
Yes.
Yes. Just to people, like, they don't understand the numbers, the smells, the lack of amenities, the lack of food. But
here's where it gets controversial, and here's where we get into the problem, is because there is a notion that if you take a large group of Indians, shall we say, from the middle of what used to be Calcutta. I actually don't know what it's called now, but it's still, they changed the name, but it's still just as smelly. But they if you just move them here, they will behave like Irish people when they get here. They will behave like everybody else, and they won't bring India with them. But they do, though, and that's the problem. And that's because it's inherent to their nature, it's inherent to their culture, it's inherent to Hinduism, it's inherent to their history. And that is why these countries themselves have to develop their own way out of the poverty that they find themselves in.
Devil's advocate. There's an Irish pub in just about every town and city all across the, well, actually, no, there isn't, all across the English-speaking world anyway, but you will find a touch of Ireland all across the world. Is it not exactly the same thing?
No, it's not, because, and then so here's where we get into the very heavy business of because it's racial. And the first thing, for example, about the United States, which is where the largest number of our people went outside of the union, as it were, because of course the easiest place to go was always obviously England. So there was a large Irish population that always found its way there. Now that was under the one government at the time, and we still have free travel now. But the United States is the classic example, and it was a Western European culture established in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and elsewhere. And that's where Irish people are still going when they do emigrate. Now, I'm not happy about the fact that all these Irish people were forced to immigrate, but why did it work? And why is migratory patterns not working now? Is because it was exclusively, but particularly in the United States, where it was.
You could have just stood up and walked past. Sorry, apologies.
Yeah, it would look better. It honestly would have looked better. Just walk by.
That is my wonderful mother trying to not be in the picture.
That's grand. Well, she's welcome in the picture because anyway, it worked because they were similar people. They were kindred blood, and they could mix together, and they were all of Western culture and civilization. What I'm saying basically is this: is that it is inappropriate and inapplicable to apply the Western process of modernization and the Western process of getting out of poverty to the populations of India or the populations of China. It's an inappropriate way for them to develop. And because it's an inappropriate way for them to develop, it's causing them to develop in the wrong way. It's not suitable for them. And so it's failing them. So there's a double failing. They can't meet Western developmental goals or standards through Western methods because they are not of Western culture and civilization. They would find their own way in time. But it would be peculiar to themselves, and it would be peculiarly Indian, and it would be peculiarly Chinese. Or it would be peculiarly Malaysian, or it would be peculiarly. But what you have in the United States and Canada, among what we would call the white people of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, etc., is European populations. And as European populations, we have had the same historical development. One of the great tricks among the many things that the British did to us, one of the great tricks that they played upon the Irish people was that we were not integrally part of the European culture and civilization, that we were a colony of them, beneath them, off to one side. But that's a very recent phenomenon in world historical terms. I mean, it's literally the act of union forward that you find that. And then the Irish went abroad to the United States and elsewhere and reintegrated into the wider Western world in that fashion. Prior to that, Ireland was a very mainstream European civilization and culture. The aristocrats, the clan system of Ireland was the clan system of Scotland, was previous to that had been the clan system of Germany and the clan system of France and elsewhere. We were a European people and part of that whole surge of European peoples. Now, I don't think that requires a political unity because we have diverged on our own individual cultural path, which is unique to itself. But it is dramatically more similar, if that, I know, I do realize that's very poor English as I say it, but we are dramatically more similar to the peoples of Europe than we are to the peoples outside of Europe. And we are dramatically more similar. An Irish person, shall we say, living in the west of Ireland in the 1830s was dramatically more alike to a settler in the 13 colonies of the United States, or the original 13 states. Even then, than we are to the Indian or the Chinese or the African today.
Okay,
Even if he only lives 2 miles.
we'll circle back to that in a while, but I'm going to throw in one of my one of my curveballs just because I like to see people's reactions. How did you guys meet?
You want to answer that?
That's the woman's prerogative to tell that story.
The two of you
I
paused
can't
at exactly the
explain.
same time, and it was like the both of you kind of went, "Oh God, we better get our story straight."
No, it's not a question of getting the story straight. It's more a case of it's a woman's prerogative, because I don't know why this woman was ever attracted to me in the first instance.
You're
Why
fishing.
why she would have the slightest interest in being with me. And so if you ask me, Martin, right, how did we get to be a couple, and how are we married, and how have we children, is I actually don't know the answer to that. I actually physically don't know that. I can tell you the historical
as a man, it's a good answer. Yeah.
but I don't know, because I don't understand
Will
it.
you be quiet?
I'm just happy it is what it is, and don't mess with it.
Right, off you go, Rebecca.
We met at a meeting down in Limerick. We met at a meeting when I was in college down in Limerick. It was just some random pro-life meeting thing that I was at, and he was at it, and he stood up and asked some question at it, and whatever way he spoke, I was just like, I was just in awe of him, because you've seen him speak, and you've seen him in his videos and the way he speaks, and he just asked some question, and it was, pro-life has always been this really big issue for me. I was adopted, so pro-life has always been a big thing for me, and I've always been pro-life, and I remember, like, as a child, I can remember knowing what abortion was, and talking with my friends about it and everything, and so it's always been a big issue for me. And I happened to be at this meeting, and I happened to hear him speak, and I went up to him afterwards, and I just said, like, that was, oh no, one of the kids coming in. You okay? He's okay.
No, it's okay. I had my mother running back and forward there. That's fine.
He's coming. He's all right. I happened to hear him speak, and I went up to him afterwards, and I just said, like, I thought you were amazing. You were incredible. And he was like, oh, thanks very much. And he was all professional and everything. And I said, if you ever want to, meet up and go for a drink, or we'll, whatever, well, not for a drink, but we'll go for, for coffee or whatever. We could do that, and that'd be nice. And he was like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. And he was kind of, he's friendly, like, but kind of looking at me like, okay, this is a bit weird. And I was going, look, here's my number, maybe we could text sometime. And so then we did text for a little bit after that. And I can remember he was very, very, very slow to take the hint that I liked him. He was extremely slow. If anything, like, he was trying to put me off, he was like, I'd send him a text. I'd be like, oh, I'm so tired, I can't go to sleep, will we have a chat? And he'd be like, well, I'm very tired, I'm off to sleep, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Well, it just didn't seem very likely to me. That's all I'm saying. So I thought I was jumping. Insofar as she threw any hints in my direction, I thought they were delusions of grandeur.
You were very
slow. So I tried to ignore them until they became patently impossible to ignore. And then
like you pretty much fell for Justin the first time you heard him speak.
I was just telling the child to turn off the other light. Yeah, turn it off there, Jamie, because it's making a fan noise. Yeah, thank you. He's turned on the fan now in the other room, and it's going to make.
Fine. Don't worry about night. Don't listen to. Kids and fans are more important than anything. Yeah. So like, it's a case of this is just a thing. So if you do what you have to do. Yeah.
First time I heard him speak, he was just amazing, and I fall from every time I hear him speak. He's just incredible. He's like,
the clinching moment was that she was going to go for, was it 3 months of the summer to another country to teaching experience, part of your college course teaching experience. and we were kind of going, oh, I'll miss you, like, oh yeah, all in the, like, you know, platonic and friendly way. And I went, no, I'm not. I'm just going to say it straight out. No, I don't want you to go. And she came back with, why don't you want me to go? And I said, well, if you didn't go, then we would have the summer together. And she sent me a text going, what do you mean by together? And then I just said, as a couple. And I press on that text, and it was like, oh, now you've done it.
How long did you leave him wait, Rebecca? Do you remember?
I can't remember. I can't even remember what I said back. What did I say back? What did I say back to that?
Yes, that's what you said. Yes, that's what I want to.
That was nice of me.
And then we rang like for an actual phone call, and then we were
14 years
we
later.
were officially a couple over the phone.
Very good.
But we've had a lot of back and forth and a lot of and we'd met a few times, but it was all very just you know.
Yeah, but it's a lovely story, and people should know things like that. Like I said, it's about humanizing everybody, and like we all have little stories, you know what I mean, that make us. There's elements of you're both well aware of it. There's elements of branding, you know what I mean, that can be. I mean, look, the reality is that sometimes it's actually hurtful because you're actually thinking, Jesus, am I this that they're trying to make me out to be, or how do you guys deal with? You're quite public, so I see how you deal with it. We'll say publicly in relation to. I've seen you come back at people who make statements about you. Rebecca, I've seen you defend Justin. I've seen you come back at people who make statements to you. How at home, just the two of you, do you deal with the fact that you openly have enemies? Like, you know what I mean? I have enemies, and then you have detractors, you have naysayers, you have people that purportedly want the same thing as you, and that you want the same thing as them, yet they still look down their noses at you. You know, how do you deal with that in just day-to-day life? You know, just walking around where you live, and just would say, is it a constant burden, or are you able to kind of box it off and not carry it with you every day? And it's to both of you.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, like that there's people who are supposedly on the same side as us, you know, and personally for me, that's the hardest thing that I've had to deal with. Like, I'm okay with the lefties because they're just like, I mean, if they liked me, I would be saying something wrong. You know, if these people think I'm doing something right, then I'm clearly doing something wrong. But the things that get to me and did get to me were especially, you know, around the time of the coup, and people that I thought were close to us and people that I would have had in my home. And, you know, like, they have met my children, and, you know, they knew me personally and they knew my husband personally, and then they say such derogatory things about him. I found that hard. You know, I was upset by that. Justin is a bit of a kind of a tougher skin than me when it would come to that. But like, I mean, we would talk about it, like, and we would just try and, you know, go through it, and Justin would kind of calm me down sometimes, because I know, for example, when James Reynolds released the video that night, and he said all this awful stuff about Justin. I mean, I rang James. Now, James has subsequently said he was afraid to answer the phone to me because he didn't know what I would say to him. But, you know, Justin would talk me down from that, and he would say, like, you know, don't let him get to you. Don't go there. He's not worth it. You know, he's just not worth getting that upset over something like that. But those are the things that would get to me. People who are supposed to be on our side and aren't. That would upset me. But I don't know you, Justin.
Yeah, that would be the only people. It's only when I'm shocked that I am upset, if you like, or discombobulated. The leftist comments, actually, if they only realised talking about a day-to-day basis, the sheer quality of entertainment we get from some of the comments, and responding to them, especially like we are here now.
We're not together. Yeah, the back and forth.
Different houses, but for whatever reason, because I'm down the country at a meeting or whatever, but for whatever reason, but we get into a like 1 o'clock in the morning argument with some lefty who's like, and we're both engaged in the same argument. We're at a distance from each other, and this moron is saying these things which are I assume are supposed to be deeply hurtful, but because of where they're coming from. And sometimes because of the sheer absurdity of what it is that they're saying, it's kind of it's kind of a night
It's
out
fun.
for us
It's, do you know what? Do you know
sometimes.
what? Look, trolling lefties, and I'm very good at it. Is to the point where they don't come after me anymore. I get very, very little interaction with them because most of them have been blocked this point. But it's good fun, and it's I use it for two reasons. So number one, it's good to be able to actually have an argument and control yourself and actually say, right, I'm going to be very careful of what I say. I'm going to insult them. We'll see if they're smart enough to see if they actually realize they're being insulted. You know what I mean? And this, that, and the other. So it's a good kind of a mental workout. But the other thing then is you have to remind yourself every now and then is you have to engage with these people, just to remind yourself they have no basis in logic, they have no fundamental arguments. They couldn't, if it came to it, and it came to a debate, a live debate or something like that, these people have nothing. They've hearty words, they've a couple of sayings and chants and stuff like that. And outside of that, there's nothing between their ears. There's no critical thinking. There's no deep thought. I question myself all the time. I doubt myself all the time. I ask the question to people that are close to me: am I imagining this, or is this actually happening? Is this in my head? And I have those conversations with people. Okay, is our country actually under threat? Are we being outbred? You know what I mean? Is the rise of Islam a serious concern? And I'll have those conversations with people, and just to check myself, because we can get caught in echo chambers. So you have to step out of it every now and then and ask a normie or ask a lefty or have a conversation with somebody outside of your outside. So just I mentioned Islam there. I did mean to bring it up earlier on when we were talking about it. Is it something you're concerned about? And I'll just go straight away. I right now, to me, the clear and present danger at the minute in this country is the rise of Islam. That is the most concerning thing I'm worried about, especially with the spate of new mosques being granted planning permission. I'm just interested in both your thoughts.
Well, did you see the new first year Irish primary school book?
The book, I saw it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like, what? I mean, I showed that to my mother there. She was a primary school teacher for 40 years, and she was like, what on earth? Like, what? I mean, it is a big issue. I mean, they really are pushing it. They're trying to normalize it, and there's just mosques everywhere. I mean, when we used to live down in Limerick, there was literally like the biggest mosque ever across the road from us in Doyle.
Have passed it on numerous occasions because I travel that way, and the numbers are very, very, very concerning.
Massive.
Very concerning.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is a real threat. It is something. It is absolutely. I mean, Justin,
given what's just happened in the UK in relation to, and look, we had this in Ireland from probably the 1940s, 1950s, all the way through to the early 90s. We've had scandals where the state has assisted in covering up horrific abuse. You know, it existed. We as a people have dealt with this and come to terms with it, and perhaps reconciled, perhaps not. You know what I mean? But we accepted the fact that it happened. Whereas in the UK, they're almost in full deniability mode. There's been a couple of court cases and stuff like that where horrific details have come out. But for the most part, it's still being brushed under the carpet. Why, as a people, when we've already been through this in our history, are we happy to allow this happen again in probably a much more horrific format?
I think there's a number of things that come under the heading of what you said. For the first thing, if I could deal with it, is the arguments that the left can put forward. This is why they believe. This is the real reason why they believe in no platforming. They have to have no platforming, because if we have a platform and we get and there is a free debate, they will lose. They know that. That's what. As soon as you hear the phrase "no platform," that means like we know you're right. That's why you have to have no platform. That's why they're willing to use physical violence. Now, that physical violence that the left are willing to use becomes a whole different scenario in the context of a religious conflict, like the scale on which it would be with Islam. Because Islam regards immigration as a weapon of war. Not incidentally, or by the way, or this is like one of the side effects of a large influx of Muslims into a given country, that they will eventually be the majority and then they will eventually impose Islamic law. No, this is part of jihad. It is an actual methodology of jihad to deliberately funnel the numbers into a given area, and part of their expansion across the world from their origins in the Middle East across North Africa has literally been by that methodology of first just arriving in small numbers, minding their own business and so on and so forth, and then growing in numbers, with the design for takeover. And the shocking part about the British scenario is exactly because we know how corrupt this state can be when it comes to covering things up. And we have a scenario where there is easily enough verified evidence in the public domain in Britain to justify, beyond a shadow of a doubt, an enormous government inquiry into the totality of what happened with regard to Muslim grooming gangs, with regard to the extent to which it was not simply bad men doing bad things, but that it was organized and motivated by religious and racial hatred by the minority, still the minority, but in some areas in Britain, the majority, Muslim population against the indigenous British population. And while that's not happening in Britain, it begs the question, knowing our own history and knowing the extent to which things can be covered up and were covered up, it begs the question. It doesn't beg the question, is it happening here? It begs the question, to what extent is it happening here? Because anybody who is naive enough to believe that there is nothing like the Rotherham gang scenario taking place within this country would need, in the first instance, they would need to answer the question is, where are the young girls gone missing from Tusla care? Where are they? Just that simple question. Without any addition of, I'm accusing Roderick O'Gorman or his department that these girls are here or they are here. No, just answer the question. Where are they? Where are they in the first instance? And if we can ascertain that they are somewhere safe, then we can settle. Then we can settle on that. But the department seems to find it an insulting question, and one it refuses to investigate, and one it refuses to answer, and one that Tusla refuses to engage with.
So you have the exact same rhetoric that happened in the UK. So is this because our systems of governance are so similar, or is it because there's a genuine fear in the state in tackling Islam because of what it's capable of? That they're all hoping to tread softly, and maybe they'll go away.
The first instance would be, whether we like it or not, the legal and political systems of Ireland and Britain are so similar because many of them just changed name and just changed ranking. But the law, all of the common law of England was transferred over to Ireland.
A conversation at another time about the City of London, but
so we have all of that. Whether we like it or not, prior to becoming within the imperial orbit of the European Union in Brussels, we continued, and we continue to this day to a certain extent, to be within the much diminished at this point, but still the imperial orbit
Empire,
of Britain and Westminster. Not to mind as the actual occupation of the 6 counties of the northeast. But there is, on behalf of our own political class, and maybe we got this actually from the British, is in a different way, is an inferiority complex to all things foreign, and therefore a self-abnegation when it comes to defending what is Irish against what is foreign. And in a particular instance, because of the history of the Catholic Church in Ireland, the institutional history has not been separated from the theological history. The faith has not been separated from the immoral actions of the institutions of the Catholic Church. And they have often been defended by theological Catholics, as it were, faithful Catholics, unnecessarily so, in my opinion, unnecessarily so. The institution of the Catholic Church does not need to be defended beyond what is true, and there is a lot wrong there, and there was a lot wrong, historically speaking.
I'd like to hear your thoughts on something.
That gives us a kind of a religious complex when it comes to dealing with with other Christian denominations in the first instance, but even more so when it comes to Islam, because the classic social media retort is to well, what about Muslim paedophile grooming gangs? Is, oh yeah, but sure, didn't the Catholic Church do that? Well, if it did, then it was wrong and it was evil and it was bad. And why are we repeating it? It shouldn't the lesson be that institutions and religions should not be above?
Not at all.
They have to see data. Hello, boys. Can you
What's
see
your
me?
name?
Dada.
Say something, boys.
Dad.
Teddy, have you anything to say?
Hello.
Bob.
Hello.
That was big. That was like the
about a thumbs up. We got 2 thumbs up. Oh, I'm going to say it again. Enjoy them when they're that small, because it's very, very different when they get bigger.
Sorry.
No.
I better go.
No, Rebecca, you jump off if you want. Or listen to me. You can jump off if you want, but you're more than happy to stay on as well. And don't worry about it. It's lovely.
I'll mute my mic so I can still hear. I'll mute.
Perfect. And just jump in again. Just pick up one of the kids and shake them when you want to come in again. Right. Do you want to talk about Clon Erin for a bit?
Right, you'll have to ask me a question because
right. Okay. So you know I'm curious, right? So you know I was talking to one of your I'm not sure how would you even term it? Members? Is that the fair term to say?
Yeah,
in the west of Ireland.
Quite well. What's your colleague? Whatever. Yeah. We talked
about a vetting process. I'm curious. I'm going to put you on the spot. Is there an actual, I would say, formal vetting process to join, so to speak? And as a social experiment, could somebody go through it if it did exist?
Right. Let's not make this sound too shadowy, right?
Yeah. No, we'll do. Listen, I love
all
shadows.
it is right. Membership is membership, and that's just a matter of like signing up on and sending the €20 and you're on a list, right? But a list of names is a dead list, as you well know. It means absolutely nothing. I mean, to a certain extent, the membership contributions fund some of the things you do, but not to a terribly large extent, because I mean, €20 per member, It doesn't take you far, right? So that's not, I mean, not that people aren't welcome to join at that level, but that's not, there's no need to be vetting people for that. Where the vetting process takes place is where people are going to be activists. So they're going to represent the organization in the public square, as it were. So they're going to be seen, they're going to be heard, they're going to have Clonaireann leaflets, they're going to have Clonaireann banners, and so on and so forth. They will be identified with us, and therefore we have to have some notion of what kind of people they are before they are in that position. But it's not that, it's, you know, it's not MK Ultra either. It's like, it's simply getting to know somebody before you allow them to be in a position where they can say, yes, I represent Clonaireann, and when I say this, I say it on behalf of Clonaireann. That's we need to get to know an ordinary person who has just joined. He or she is met by a couple of the members and just a chat first, just to get a, you know, and I mean, some people are quite obviously deranged, as you know, on first meeting, and you just, you know, right? Some people are quite obviously sound the first time you meet them, and you, again, you know. But the vast majority of people, this is the way it works in life, will give off a certain vibe the first time you meet them, which might be plus or minus, but it's over a protracted period of time. All that vetting is getting to know somebody and getting deeper into their motivations. So we have a set of beliefs, and we'd like to know why somebody believes, agrees with us. Why do you believe? Where are you coming from here? Because if your motive is not the welfare of the Irish people and the Irish nation, then ideological agreement on some point of principle is really of no use to us. We can't do anything with a person who has dark motives, shall we say, to be blunt, because that dark motive will eventually express itself in a dark action. And that's all that vetting is. So as a human experiment, as you say, yes, everybody survives the vetting process, but whether they survive it as an activist member of Clonaireann, or whether we decide that, no, we best leave them where they are, is another matter. We're trying to ensure that we get people of sound character, good people. We're not searching for numbers in the same way as a political party would be. We are searching for people who are ideologically sound. We are searching for people who are character sound. We are searching for people who have the right motivation. And we're also searching for people who can spread the ideas that we have to within their society in general, or within the organizations they're currently members of. For example, Clonaireann membership is not automatically National Party membership, or vice versa. Now, we don't want to get into the whole legalities.
I'll be honest, I actually left Barra introducing you as the leader of the National Party. I purposely not brought it up because I do not know whether there'd be legal implications if our conversation went. So
there wouldn't be legal implications, except it's more complicated than it needs to be. And ultimately, it's not going to be decided in a Twitter argument or on a podcast argument between you and I, or between me and somebody else. It's going to go to the High Court. There will be a judgment made there. The Electoral Commission has already made its judgment in my favour. And there's what counts. Other people saying, oh, I don't like Justin Barrett, or I do like Justin Barrett. All of that is going to be ultimately irrelevant.
What has liking you got to do with anything. This is the thing I can't quite right, especially from the political thing. Like it's like being at work. You don't like everybody you work with, yet you can form a very productive working environment once you have adults in the room. I fail to understand. Now, if you're friends with somebody or you're familiar with somebody or get on with somebody, it might make decision making smoother. Sometimes it doesn't, but this thing of notion you have to like everybody to or agree with everybody to form. Look at the state of our current government.
Yes, exactly.
And it's not a coherent functioning unit, but it's pretending to be. But this is the thing that I can't understand, especially across nationalism. And I spoke about earlier why are the left so better organized than the right, and as far as I can see, nationalism just can't get out of its own way. Everybody thinks their idea is best, whereas I know for a fact that nobody's idea is best. But guess what? If you take a little bit of Justin's idea and a bit of somebody else's idea and somebody else's idea, and you put all that together and get these, we'd say, spokespeople or powerful individuals or well thought of individuals actually working along the same path, that parallel, doesn't have to be together under one umbrella. There's the ingredients there for success.
Yeah, this is very important, I think, is that there's an obsession on our side, I think, and the left have never bothered with this, the broader left, the NGO left, that there has to be an organizational unity. There does not necessarily have to be an organizational unity in the sense of one leadership, one committee, and one like organizational structure through the country, in order for people to cooperate in any given day in a particular place. That's one of my views. Now I'm going to be devil's advocate against myself here and say, what has liking or not liking me to do with things is, well, I guess what my detractors would say is that I am unlikable, and that is a political impediment, right? That's the way they would put it. Yeah. Is that the same ideas, if they were expressed by somebody else in a different way, would be more palatable to people than the way I articulate them or present them. Or there's actual ideological differences where they say, no, what he's saying is just plain, honest to God wrong. And that's a point of view. But as I say, as that relates to the leadership of the National Party or the legalities of that, is not relevant. It's ultimately the Electoral Commission has gone through the legal issues. They have concluded that I am still the leader of the National Party. I will need a High Court order to enforce that. That is to say, to get the physical things that the mechanism of the party back into my hands. And that will be decided in the High Court as a legal argument. It will now be decided on a podcast as to who is right politically or ideologically. Because I'm sure whatever High Court justice is going before will be ideologically hostile to both parties bringing their case, in that sense, that he or she will disagree vehemently with the political views of both parties to that case. But that's not the issue. The issue is the question of ownership. And that's a matter of law. So from there,
when that issue is sorted, will the National Party continue as a viable nationalist political party, and is Clonaireann a completely non-political organisation?
Well, Clonaireann won't be engaging in electoral politics. It won't be putting up candidates. It's seeking to persuade people to take a particular point of view on a particular issue, and of course we have a broad ideological agenda. So we're happy if one party takes this idea but rejects the others. Okay, there's a little bit of Clonaireann that we left. Our idea there, and they took it up, and they took the rest of it. They said, no, we're not interested in it.
So you're talking about civic responsibility and basically planting ideas. I love the idea of planting an idea and walking away and seeing what matures, and
see what other people do with it. But as an electoral force, the National Party, and this is true of all of the nationalist parties, if you want to call them of the right, they cannot be electorally successful against a cultural backdrop which is antithetical to it. And we need to accept, and I think it wasn't accepted in the run-up to the general election. There's still a great deal of resistance to it in the activist political circles now. But the fact of the matter is that we do not the National Party, not the Irish Freedom Party, not Ireland First, not any of the groups, nor indeed the independents, even the ones who were elected as such to individual council seats here and there. We do not represent a majority of the Irish people as of this moment. Mm-hmm. Our mind and our way of thinking is contrary to the thinking of the average person. And so you can't have a populist party unless you have a popular base. And and the only way to create a popular base is either you do what Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, the professional parties do, is you go out and you ask people through focus groups and various opinion polls and so forth, what do you want us to say? And then you just repeat it back to them and say whatever that is. That's a populist road to success, and it's one which has worked for them. It's brought them back into government. They asked the focus groups, what should we say during a general election? Then there is another way, which ought to be the nationalist way, in my opinion, which is that we understand, we take on board that the vast majority of people are not on our wavelength, are not thinking the way we think right now, and that they must be persuaded. And we must put forward persuasive arguments as to what the alternative we're offering, first of all, why it is necessary, why what we're saying is actually true, and how it will work in practice if it were actually to be done, and make that attractive to them. But in the first instance, and this was the real disaster, I think, last November, is the vast majority of people haven't the faintest idea who we are, to be honest. We have some like diehard enemies on the left who spend a lot of time thinking about you and I and and the various other figures, if you like, that are in the public domain. But the vast majority of Irish people sleep soundly tonight without your name or my name ever entering their heads.
Yeah, I'm quite happy being a nobody for the moment.
And so am I, as such. But
I can be much more effective.
But only so far as if my ideas were more commonly held.
Sorry to interrupt you. I spoke to George Casey not so long ago on Spaces, and I put the question to him that in relation to libertarianism, because I'm fascinated by all the different types of political ideas, and I've tried my best to find out as much as I can, but I always say I just have a crude understanding of everything. But I asked him the question, is Ireland as a country mature enough for a libertarian party? And his answer was straight away no. He just said full stop no. And you were talking there about would say a nationalist party, but you could have nationalist populism. Essentially what Trump did in the States is populism. You know what I mean? It's a form of populism. If you could find the right personality, you could probably have a fantastic populist movement in Ireland, but it would be success measured in the likes of Aintu. That's as far as you would get with it. You couldn't. We as a people are not, in my opinion, are not mature enough to grasp these concepts outside of the old Civil War parties. We're just
there's another difficulty as well, the extent to which Trump is a individual personality. Who has managed to touch a populist chord with people, in the sense that, I like Donald Trump, back again to I like or I don't like, or like it's like I would say, for example, the 2016 to 2020 was like a huge disappointment if you believed in Trumpism. as he expressed it, insofar as there was an ideology there, insofar as there was a coherent set of ideas that he was supposedly bringing into government. What he actually implemented was a huge disappointment. And again, the question arises, to what extent is Trump going to deliver on what people perceive his second term is going to be? But I find it almost impossible, as somebody on the right of the political spectrum, not to find myself laughing out loud sometimes at some of the stuff he says in a positive way. As in, like, yeah, that phrase you've used is bang on the mark. Now, was there any substance behind that? There's another question. Is there intellectual substance? Is there ideological substance? Or is that just a one-liner that really works? I think sometimes there isn't, actually. I think sometimes there isn't, and that's the problem. And that Trump is personally popular, whether the left in Ireland like that to be the case or not, or whether, for that matter, you or I do, is neither here nor there. I mean, I've seen in the last few days people trying to suggest that at the Super Bowl he was booed and hissed, right, by the crowd. And I'm going, he won the election last November, guys. You can't tell me that he is unpopular.
I'm going to segue into something there
Today.
because it's something I was thinking about that I wanted to talk to you about. So that is the prime example of history being rewritten in real time. What happened is not being, and it's in the past, so it's history, but they're actually changing it and it's a phenomenon I've witnessed for the last 5 years of my life. I've witnessed history being rewritten in real time, and it then starts making you question everything that was written and everything that you've read and everything that we think we know that is fact. And the more I read and the more I look into it, I realize that, oh my God, we actually know nothing. We know so little unless you really, really, really go digging. From an Irish point of view, we know the normal people, just the average Joe from the population, or Mick or Mary or whatever. We know very little about our history, our own history. We know about we'll say after we'll say colonial times, the famine, this, that, and the other. But why aren't we taught about our ancient history and who we were and where we came from and like I've just on other conversations I've said, like, why isn't there big HBO TV series on Fionn McCool and Cuchulainn? And our folklore is absolutely amazing. The stories are absolutely fantastic. We have a whole I can't think of the word now. What do you call it? Like a row of gods. What is it? The
pantheon.
A pantheon of gods. Yeah.
Yes.
You know what I mean? We have this fantastic folklore and history, and bar maybe one or two festivals during the year and the odd historian thing on. I don't really watch mainstream media, but I'm sure that they still make them from time to time. We've completely abandoned our heritage and our history. We kind of measure ourselves from the famine on.
That's very true, and it's one of the reasons why this is one of the reasons why the Sinn Féin's claim to nationalist credentials has been able to withstand the abandonment of basic nationalist credentials, is because unlike, for example, the United States, Irish nationhood is not bound up with a form of government. It is not. There are other expressions of Irish nationalism than republicanism. Now, I happen to be a Republican. I happen to think in 2025 going forward, I cannot conceive of a form of government to be applied to this nation that other than one that is founded on the concept of a constitutional republic. I can't see us returning to a monarchy, for example, a Gaelic monarchy, and certainly not the one across the sea from us. I cannot see that. But the fact of the matter is there have been other expressions of equally authentic expressions of Irish nationalism that are not of the Republican tradition. that are of the monarchist tradition, that are prior to that of the clan tradition. And even if you take away the folklore, shall we say, which is the mists of time and history, where they're probably, for example, Finn McCool, it was probably, if other European folklore is anything to go by, he's probably an amalgamation of several actual historical individuals who actually existed, and a small exaggeration of some of, for one of the things I often say to people is if Finn McCool actually ate of the salmon of knowledge, he would have just sat down and went, I can see Ireland in 2025 and I am not bothered, right? So we know for a fact that this man did not eat of the salmon of all knowledge, because had he done so, he would not have formed the Fianna. He would have realized that's a waste of time. Or maybe on some level he sees further than 2025 and sees that there's a point to, I don't know, the crisis that we're going through right now. I don't know, but the likelihood is. But there's a verifiable history there too, a verifiable history that other countries tell of themselves. Whether they're completely accurate or not, who knows? But like the French will have TV series about Louis XIV. They'll have a TV series about the French Revolution. They'll have pro-revolution films. They will have films about Napoleon. Now, the latest one, it's not worth watching. But that's neither here nor there. There's actually a French mini-series, and I think it's still on one of the subscription channels, Netflix. It's the French version of the life of Napoleon. It's a mini-series, about 4 episodes, 2 hours long each, which I think is, first of all, it's more accurate, and second of all, presents him as he actually was, with his flaws. But Joachim Phoenix portrays a man who could never have been Emperor of France, right? He just couldn't have been. So the mind is, anyway. But but that's fine. That's fine. This is a presentation of a story, and it's presented in a certain way. So where are our stories of the O'Neills? Where is the story of the flight of the Earls? This is actual documented history. It's not. It doesn't fit into an area of doubt, as it were. I mean, there may be historians who argue the detail, but whether the 9 Years' War took place or not is not arguable. The main causes of it are not arguable. The rights and wrongs of it may be arguable, but only there's the Irish point of view and the English.
One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist.
Exactly. But the point is there's this rich history that predates the political form we find ourselves in today, and most especially that transcends the political form of the Civil War and Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and that Sayers thought conception of ourselves. It's,
how do we capture it? How do we capture it? How do we bottle it? And how do we feed it to the nation?
You see, I don't know. I don't think one person can, because, for example, I know some of this, but I know it through reading other people's books on it. So I haven't researched the 9 Years' War. I've read somebody else's texts on that. I've read books on the Great O'Neill. I've read books on the O'Neill clan. I've read books on the Jacobites. I've read books on the Confederation of Kilkenny and so forth. I found them with great difficulty. One of the advantages of the age of the internet, I guess, is they are findable now. To try and find them back in the bookshop days would have been impossible, practically. But it is not a job for one person. It's not even a job for one organization. But it is normal and natural, and it's what I said. It's partly to do with something that the British did to us with the Act of Union. They kind of shoved the Irish off to one side and said, you have only ever interacted with the rest of the world through us. And to a certain extent, we have come to believe that ourselves. And the idea that the only valid, authentic Irish nationalism, and I say this as somebody who believes in constitutional republicanism, but to say that the only valid form of Irish nationalism is republicanism is to deny the vast majority of our history. It is to ignore thousands of years. And some of those years are relatively recent. I mean, they're not in living memory, but they're in our great-grandfather's living memory that predate the famine, that predate the Act of Union, that go back 200 or 300 years in the history of a nation like Ireland. You know, the United States began with 1776. We did not. 1776 was 1,776 years into the post-Christian era of Irish history. That's 2,000 years that we just decide to ignore. For the United States, that's all there is. And prior to that, there's the colonial settlements. And prior to that, they have to trace their ethnic origins back to the European continent. We do not. We are an ancient nation with an ancient history. It isn't for one person to do that, but it is, I guess, for us as individuals to make ourselves aware of that. And above all else, to break out of the psychology that we are not an integral part of European culture, Western culture and civilization as an independent entity, not as something that simply exists in the world through its relationship with the British Empire, and not to view ourselves simply as a constant rebellion. That's all we are. We were always, we have. It's like, it's to quote Orwell, we've always been at war with Britain. We will always be at war with Britain. There is no other enemy but Britain. That's simply not true. That's simply not true. And the English people and the Scottish people and the Welsh people have never been our enemies as peoples. They've never been our enemies. It's always been the British political establishment, which has also been the Anglo-Irish political
It's the state, it's the state, not the nation. It goes back to
it's the state, not the nation. And we have no enemies among the nation. In the nation of England.
I wish
no enemies in the
every
nation
success.
of Wales.
I wish Englishmen every success in fighting for their country, because by God they have to fight, because the numbers game is against them.
But the British state is the enemy. The English state is the enemy of the British state is the enemy of the Scottish, the English, and the Welsh people. The French state is the enemy of the French people. The German state is the enemy of the French people. And now some people just think that put a lot of hope in Giorgia Meloni. I don't put so much of my hopes there. But even if she were absolutely and completely authentic in and of herself, again, like Trump, she's an individual at the top of a system. And the system of the Italian state is anti-Italian and anti the Italian nation. And so these systems have to go.
Okay, so we can't collapse. We're probably not going to have a revolution, and we won't have heroes again. And we're not designed that way. Or if it would take a series of, you spoke about this before in Spaces, that it would take a series of events that kind of everybody would have to go around the world together. That it would have to be a domino effect, that the whole of Europe would have to rise at the same time. Yeah,
there would. I mean, if you could quite literally, like by some miracle, convert the Irish people to exactly the way we wanted them to think, and therefore vote exactly the way we wanted them to vote, and create a government in Dáil Éireann that is exactly what we wanted, and that government then from Parliament House. You see, even Parliament is foreign. It's a Westminster format. Even Parliament is foreign. But if you could do that, then you'd have to work your way down through the civil service, and you'd have to work your way through the structure of An Garda Síochána and the defence forces and so on and so forth to Gaelicise those. And when you had done that, if you could have do that, then you would be confronted by a hostile world. And we are a tiny nation.
Could you?
And
Could you foresee?
we're in no position to do
Could
that.
you foresee building a completely parallel society that literally starts as small little communities going, well, guess what? We don't care about the council anymore, and we're not paying you rates, and we're not doing this, and we're not doing that. We're going to grow our own food, and we're going to generate our own power, and we're going to do our own thing, and leave us alone. And if you come near us, there'll be consequences, and make it appealing enough that you will attract more and more communities to do it, and literally build an alternate society where you can make the state almost obsolete. In rural Ireland, anyway. It might take a little bit longer for the cities, but
I would question only there the phrase that you have used, completely. There is no alternative to assuming power in the state at some point, because while the state remains the enemy of the nation, the state has vast powers that even when we complain about the behaviour of certain members of An Garda Síochána in Newtown, Mount Kennedy, and in Coolock, and so on and so forth, that is the thin end of the wedge of what a modern European state can actually do to oppress its people if it were determined to do so on a mass scale, and especially when it has corralled a fringe minority, shall we say, and what it could do. They haven't nearly exercised the amount of power that they could, or the amount of force or violence that they could direct against us, that they could do. So ultimately, power in the state must come into nationalist hands. But in the meanwhile, we have to live. And in the meanwhile, how may we live our authentic lives as individuals and as families in a way that is healthy and nourishing for ourselves as human beings and as souls in the metaphysical sense, and our children and our families and our communities. And there is a huge role, I think. I don't exactly know how it would be done, and I'd be happy to sit down and talk with anybody about the details and what we could do within Clon Éireann and within any organisation that I'm involved in or people that I work with.
that is a conversation I would be interested in having. Yeah, I definitely.
That's a conversation that first of all must be had. Second of all, we would be very open to having it. And a lot could be done to make daily life more bearable, even within the context of this hostile state apparatus. But that hostile state apparatus must be dismantled at some stage, and the nation and the state must become one again at some point. And in order for that to succeed, on an international scale, in other words, in order to survive, never mind succeed, in order to survive, it needs to happen as an authentic, organic outgrowth of the nationalisms of Europe. The French must become French again, the Germans must become German, the English must become English. I think Britain has, now God help me, I'm going to say this anyway, Britain has to go. There's no, without the empire, British nationalism does not, to me, make any sense. It is not a nationalism. It was imperialist from the get-go. As soon as the English took their law-making power outside the borders of England, they were already on an imperialist path. And they were already disrespecting the nationalism of the Welsh, and then the nationalism of the Scots, and then long before they started wandering around.
Justin, we're gonna have to wind it because I'm a stickler for this. We've both sets of 55 minutes used up, this is the longest one I've ever done, and we could actually probably go for another hour or two. But I'm a stickler for this. But the caveat is you'll have to come on again at some stage.
Absolutely, and
it's probably another few conversations that would be good to have that people can eavesdrop in. I want to finish on a question, and it's a very, very, very serious one. When are we getting the Justin and Rebecca podcast?
We've discussed this as to whether we should do it, and sometimes we've discussed it in the context of we'll have 15 minutes of a conversation. Like Gogglebox, we'll be watching something on the television and we'll be commenting to each other on it. We should do that. But,
you could probably monetize that as well.
I just have this weird feeling that the two of us, if we actually turned on an actual camera and there was just the two of us there, we just go silent. We just stare at the camera perhaps and not say anything at all. I don't know. There are no immediate plans. My God, the woman can and I mean, to her great credit, she is staying on top of the situation, but she's dealing with 5 children under 10 already, and to just spend a little while here this evening, as you can see.
No, fair play to her, and please, I know she had to drop off, but please pass on my sincere thanks, because I really do appreciate that.
She's like, I mean, I love her, so I'm allowed to say that. So
I personally think
she's a great
from the outside, you look like a fantastic couple. I wish I'm just a long, happy marriage, and you're gonna have great fun with those boys. Oh God help you when they start drinking. I said, God help you when they start drinking, if they start drinking. Five boys, a small army. Very, very good. Look, Justin, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
I would really, really like to do it again, because, like I said, we've been talking for 2 hours and it literally just flowed, and we barely scratched the surface of anything. So if you're ever willing to come on again, I'd be more than happy.
Absolutely, no problem.
Okay, I'm gonna drop you down there, and you can stay on for a few minutes if you want, and we can we'll finish off. Just kind of I always kind of do a wind down after it, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So,
okay.
Right. If you can stay on for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna just drop you down there. That was a fantastic show. Absolutely. So massive thank you to Justin and Rebecca. A lot of viewers here tonight, so hello everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in, and you can watch this back on my YouTube, on Auntie Casey's YouTube, and you'll probably be able to get it on Facebook and Twitter again as a playback. So thanks for watching. Good night.